I'm Rick Donlon. I'm a med-peds doctor, and I get to live and work in church in the Binghamton community in Memphis. And I'm a disciple of these guys. And so I'm standing because I'm a little scared. When I agreed to interview them, I knew it was only a little less frightening than running with the bulls in Spain. So I'm going to kind of do a brief introduction. Be patient with me. There's a musical theme here. Welcome to Music City. Did you know you're in Music City? Nashville, they say, is Music City. There's some great music that comes out of Nashville, the tradition of music in Nashville. This university has a tradition of training musicians, Christian musicians, and music is powerful, isn't it? I hope you felt it. I wanted to jump up and down, arise, my soul arise. So, music is powerful stuff. I'm going to talk about music in relation to these fellas, and I'm going to talk about another music city first. Can you guess which one it might be? Yeah. All right. So, yeah, they say that the top of the Mississippi Delta, the biggest town in Mississippi is Memphis, Tennessee. And, okay? And that's true. And we've got, at least in our background, Otis Redding and Johnny Cash, Sun Record Stax, Isaac Hayes, B.B. King, all these great musicians. There's one that I left out. Who would that be? Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, that's right. Also, a poor kid from Tupelo, Mississippi. The music of rock and roll is the music of the blues and the music of experience and pain from the place where these guys cut the teeth of CCHF. And music, from my own world, is a big thing. All of the students who rotate with me, the people who, the doctors and nurse practitioners, everybody, the staff who work in our clinic have to put up with my music all the time. In fact, we terrorize the new students when they come in. Say, this happened. There's a kid from Kansas who does not know who Bob Dylan is.
That's a sin.
That is a sin. So I told him, you're starting with an F right now. So the center of my musical universe, I'm not proud. I wish I could say it was Mozart or Bach, but it's this other band that you might have heard of. Okay. And you might not know much about the Beatles. We have a diverse group here. You may love the Beatles, but you can say what you want. The Beatles are the biggest thing that's happened in popular music ever, at least to this point. Billboard magazine, which nobody reads anymore, admits it. More sales than any other band ever. Again, a magazine probably no one reads much anymore except old codgers, Rolling Stone, but according to one of the editors of Rolling Stone, no one will ever be more revolutionary, more creative, and more distinctive than the Beatles. Some of you are clever enough to know where I'm going with all this. There are rare musicians in the world who don't tip their hat to the Beatles and the influence of the Beatles in all sorts of musical genres. So everyone that you see in this picture has done covers of Beatle tunes, have openly admitted the influence and the benefit that they've received from the Beatles and the music of the Beatles. Every musical genre, almost every artist, except one. There's this band from Athens, Georgia. So this is like there was a Shakespeare play and the villain just came out and then somebody cheers for him right there. Okay. All right, so the guy on the far right is a very talented musician, Michael Stipe. All right, and this is a great band. I love REM. I have REM music on my iPod. They were a really successful, especially in the 1990s, alternative rock band. But they got so big that they became the band of the year, and this is Rolling Stone in 1992, and they did an interview of Michael Stipe. And they asked him about his influences and the things that formed him as a groundbreaking musician, which he is and has been. And they asked him about the Beatles. And he said, the Beatles for me were like elevator music. I don't think that's a compliment, right? So he's gotten a little bit older, and it turns out he was separated from birth from Bruce Miller, apparently, right? He's a great musician, really. The band's great, but he doesn't get it. He doesn't realize how deeply he's indebted to the Beatles. into other rock and roll. And the Beatles got it, actually. And I want to show you that. I already mentioned this guy right here, but John Lennon, who is one of the two, Lennon and McCartney were really the most powerfully creative members of the Beatles. Lennon admired Elvis enough to do that. You think he liked Elvis a little bit? And he said, before Elvis, there was nothing. If there hadn't been an Elvis, there wouldn't have been the Beatles. And Michael Stipe needs to get that point too. So, here they are, Lennon and McCartney. 3 years ago, I did a plenary where I got in a lot of trouble because I put the picture of a prominent prosperity gospel preacher on the screen, and then I turned it into the devil. And then his wife was in the picture, and I put little horns on her head. All right? So this might be stupider. Are you ready?
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Don't you love John Perkins' hair? Isn't it great? All right.
Imagine that.
All right. You know what I'm saying, don't you? The way the Beatles influenced music, the way the influence of the Beatles has permeated all music that's come since that time, we, CCHF, have been influenced by the founding people who set into motion what happens today. Most of you don't know these men. They don't know you. You are several generations removed from them, but we want you to be connected to them. And the board is very zealous to have you know our story and know the founding principles of what we are and where we are now and where we're going in the future. All right? I remember vaguely the first time I heard John Perkins preach, and it scared me, okay? I'm one of these guys who likes to sit in the front row, and some of you were here for the Bible study. He starts very pleasantly behind the podium. Then he leaps out, right? I felt like he was this far. I thought he was going to grab, like back in high school, grab my face mask and shake my head, all right? He yelled, right? He said, "In all society!" Yes, sir, in a society. He started with a Bible passage. I don't think he ever got back to it.
Some things never change.
You okay? But when I went back and I listened to the tape, about every other thing he said was the Bible. Those of you who were here this morning, did you hear him just go and go? Some of you don't know your Bibles enough to know that he spoke mostly the Bible to us this morning. He cut left and right. He was like a halfback in the NFL. I couldn't follow him. I didn't know where was he going. He took me in my conservative, upper middle class white Republican politics and slapped me on the bottom and sat me down. I didn't know what to make of that. It's because John Perkins is a prophet. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yep.
Okay. John Perkins, prophets speak to God's people God's truth. And if you'll pardon the expression, they're the turds in the punch bowl.
What do you say? They're the turds in the punch bowl. They're the turds in the punch bowl.
John, he just called you a turd, is what he did.
Turd is kind of like a cow pie.
Yes.
Kind of like a cow pie.
We don't want prophets at the Christmas party, right?
In the punch bowl.
A prophet, I tell our house church in Memphis, prophets preach against the two I's, the letter I. And John Perkins preaches against the two I's. The first is idolatry, putting anything besides God ahead of God. And he spoke to us about that this morning. And always when you have idolatry, when God is removed from his supremacy, you get the second I, and that is injustice.
Wow, way to go, Rick.
All right. John Perkins has spent his life preaching about idolatry and injustice, both of those two eyes together. And most people don't want to hear that. Some of us do. Some people drop out of college, at least temporarily, and move to central Mississippi to become part of that. There are many people in this room and across this country who have heard the speech of this prophet and others and have responded. His book, which you have to read, is called When Justice Rolls Down. But this is the passage that he used when he came up with the title, because the prophets in the Old Testament, over and over again, Micah, Amos, Isaiah, their sharpest criticism was for bogus religiosity. Right? Faith in God and expressions of religious practice without true justice and righteousness. So this is from Amos. This is God speaking, I despise your religious festivals, your assemblies are a stench to me. Even though you bring me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Though you bring choice fellowship offerings, I have no regard for them. Away with the noise of your songs, I will not listen to the music of your harps, but let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. So, that's what a prophet looks like when he sits on his porch in a rocking chair. Okay. All right. I'm going to sit down now, and I'm going to ask H. Spees to start, because H and his wife, Terri, who's over here. Terri, would you raise your hand? They live in Fresno, California. They live in you're clapping for Fresno. Okay, good. They live in a economically challenged part of Fresno. H has many, many gifts and skills. John told me if he'd have stayed in Mississippi, he would be a congressman by now in Mississippi. And I heard he was going to run for mayor in Fresno. Is that true? Thought about it? He's been the pastor of a giant church there. He's been involved with Youth for Christ. He's a TV star. He has a television show where he promotes. Star's not the right word.
I'm the Elvis of the Catholic station.
Wow. There's a short story in that, I think. All right, so we're gonna let H set the stage. Something happened to him and his wife. She wasn't your wife at the time, I don't think, that made him want to go to Central Mississippi and become part of the story in the founding of CCHF. So I want him to take it from there.
All right, so, well, we have been knowing each other since 1971, and I'm counting it up. The friendship that God gave us has totally shaped my life. We grew up as, well, they didn't call them this then, but we grew up as yuppies in Southern California. Grew up in Glendale, California, so we're from Los Angeles. And I graduated from high school in 1970. But let me just start just a quick landscape, just to put some context on it, in 1946. So in 1946, John's older brother, Clyde, comes back as a Purple-Hearted veteran from World War II. And he shows up in New Hebron, back at his hometown. He and his girlfriend are going to see a movie. And so they're lined up in an alley beside the Caroline Theater in New Hebron, a town of about 60 miles southeast of Jackson, Mississippi, the capital. They're lined up in the alley because they're going to go on the steps up the outside of the theater to go to the balcony, because that's where the black folks sat in 1946. Now, those of you that know history know that World War II was one of the huge forces that integrated America, because black servicemen and white servicemen were serving together.